It begins on a quiet night that should have meant nothing. A pregnant woman is in life-threatening labor, collapsed on her living room floor, fighting through unbearable pain as she struggles to keep both herself and her baby alive. Meanwhile, her husband is laughing and flirting with his mistress at a restaurant barely a mile away. Everyone thinks it is just another labor emergency, but no one knows the dark truth waiting to break open. Because when a man abandons his wife at the moment she needs him most, then twists the story to protect his own reputation, he unleashes a storm he cannot stop. What follows is a battle between lies and justice, between power and consequence, a father rising to protect his daughter, and a courtroom ready to expose every secret he tried to bury. Tell us what time you are listening and where you are tuning in from. We would love to hear from you. The house was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Outside, the wind pushed through the pine trees that lined the small neighborhood in Santa Rosa, California. Inside, Emily Ward stood in the kitchen, one hand resting on her belly, feeling the slow and heavy ache that had been following her since afternoon. She tried to steady her breathing as she reached for a glass of water. The moment she lifted it, a sharp pain shot through her abdomen and forced her to grip the counter for support. She froze, unable to breathe for several seconds. Then another pain surged, stronger than anything she had felt before, fierce and blinding, as if something inside her had snapped loose. The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Emily gasped, reaching instinctively for her belly. Warm fluid rushed down her legs, soaking through her pajama pants and pooling onto the hardwood floor. For a moment she did not understand what happened. Then reality struck her with full force. Her water had broken far too early. She tried to step backward, but her knees buckled. She fell hard onto the floor, her palms hitting the wood with a dull slap. A wave of nausea washed over her. Her breath came in short bursts, quick and uneven. She felt sweat collecting at her temples even though the room was cold. The pain did not pause long enough for her to think clearly. She curled forward and tried to inhale, but the contractions closed around her like a fist. Her phone lay on the couch across the room. The distance looked impossible, yet she knew she had no other choice. She dragged herself forward, fingers clawing at the floor, her breath trembling as she pushed through another tightening in her belly. She reached the couch, after what felt like minutes, and grabbed the phone with shaking hands. Her vision blurred as she tapped Derek's number. The line rang once, twice. She pressed the phone closer to her ear, praying he would pick up. When he finally answered, his voice was irritated, not concerned. "What is it now, Emily?" She swallowed hard. A tear slipped down her cheek. She could barely form the words. "Derek, something is wrong. My water broke. I fell. I cannot stand. I need you to come home, please. I cannot breathe." Background noise spilled through the phone, the sound of clinking glasses, distant laughter, and the low hum of a restaurant. Derek sighed loudly. "Emily, relax. You always think the worst. I am in the middle of something." She tried to speak, but pain interrupted her. She cried out involuntarily, a raw and desperate sound. "Derek, please. I think the baby is coming. It is too early. I am scared." His tone sharpened with annoyance. "Emily, you need to calm down. You do this all the time. You exaggerate. I will be home later." "No, please. I cannot get up. I am bleeding. Derek, please." But he had already made up his mind. She could hear the smirk in his voice. "I said I'm busy. I will call you when I am done here." The next sound was a soft click. He had hung up. Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. Her hand trembled so badly she almost dropped the phone. A cold, hollow fear spread through her chest. She tried calling again, but the call went straight to voicemail. Tears pooled in her eyes, blurring the numbers on the screen. The contraction that followed knocked the breath from her lungs. She pressed her forehead to the floor and forced herself to inhale. She was alone, and she was in danger. She gathered what little strength she had left and turned onto her side. She could feel warmth spreading under her. She lifted her hand and saw the faint red smear on her fingertips. The sight made her heart pound harder. She whispered to her belly as if speaking to the baby would help steady her. "Stay with me. Please stay with me." Another sharp pain seized her, and she cried out again. She needed help. If Derek would not come, she had to find someone who would. She blinked hard, trying to clear her vision. The phone was still in her hand. Her thumb hovered over the keypad. Her breath shook as she pressed the buttons. 911. The call connected almost instantly. A woman's voice came through the speaker, calm and controlled. 911. What is your emergency? Emily tried to answer, but her voice broke apart. I cannot. I fell. My water broke. I am bleeding. I am 32 weeks. I cannot get up. The operator's voice softened. Ma'am, stay with me. Take a slow breath. Help is on the way. Are you in your home? Yes. I am on the floor. I cannot stand. Please hurry. Emily felt another contraction hit, fierce enough to blur her vision. She let out a strained cry before she could stop herself. The operator raised her voice just enough to guide her without panic. You are doing great. I need you to stay awake. Can you tell me your address? Emily forced the words out, her breath shaking. The operator repeated the address back to her, confirming it calmly. Good. Paramedics are on their way. They are very close. I need you to try to stay as alert as you can. Emily nodded even though the operator could not see her. Her hand slipped on the phone, the edges smudged with sweat. She felt her body growing heavier, the pain pressing down on her chest and ribs. She tried to inhale again, but the effort felt too big. Her arms trembled from holding herself upright. The operator's voice called to her again. Ma'am, are you still with me? I need you to answer me. Emily tried to respond, but only a faint sound left her throat. Her eyelids fluttered, shadows filling the edges of her vision. She wanted to fight it, but her body was giving out. She whispered a small plea to no one in particular. Please, save my baby. Her grip loosened and the phone slid from her fingers. She could still hear the distant voice calling to her, muffled now, fading quickly. Emily's head rested against the floor. Her breathing grew shallow, her body unable to hold on much longer. Somewhere far away, she heard the distant echo of a siren growing louder. Then the room dimmed, her eyes closed, and everything went quiet. The night had settled over Santa Rosa with a heavy stillness, the kind that made every sound echo more sharply than usual. The ambulance raced down the quiet street, its siren slicing through the darkness, the lights flashing in frantic bursts of red and white. As it screeched to a stop in front of Emily's home, the cold air rushed in behind the paramedics, who leaped out, moving with the sharp precision that only emergency workers possess. They rushed up the steps and reached the front door. The older paramedic knocked hard. Santa Rosa EMS. Ma'am, can you hear us? There was no response. He knocked again, louder, his voice carrying a hint of urgency. Still no answer. He exchanged a glance with his partner. The dispatcher said she stopped responding mid-call. We need to go in. Without another word, he stepped back and rammed his shoulder into the door. It splintered around the lock, swinging open just enough for them to force their way inside. The house was dim, silent, touched only by the faint glow of a lamp in the living room. The air felt cold, as if the warmth had left with Emily's consciousness. Emily, Santa Rosa EMS. Can you hear us? Their footsteps echoed as they scanned the room. The beam of a flashlight moved across the couch and floor until it found her. Emily lay collapsed on the hardwood, her body curled slightly, her hair spread around her pale face. Her arm reached toward her dropped phone, as if she had been fighting to hold on. Her breathing was shallow and sporadic. Here, I got her. They knelt beside her. One paramedic found a pulse, but it was weak and unsteady. Her skin felt cool. The younger paramedic examined the floor beneath her and saw the spreading blood, darker than before, soaking into the wood. Blood pressure is crashing. We need to move. He placed the oxygen mask over her face. Emily's eyelids fluttered, but she did not wake. Her mind drifted somewhere far away, hearing only muffled pieces of their voices, as if from underwater. They talked to her anyway, trying to keep her anchored. Emily, my name is James. We are here. Stay with us. Emily's fingers twitched weakly. A groan slipped out when another contraction tightened her abdomen. Her body jerked slightly, and the paramedic steadied her shoulders. They unfolded the stretcher and positioned it beside her. On 3. 1, 2, 3, they lifted her carefully and laid her onto the stretcher. Her head rolled to the side, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak. Only silence followed. They secured the straps and wheeled her toward the door. The older paramedic radioed ahead. 32 weeks pregnant. Severe bleeding. Unresponsive. Prep for emergency C-section. We are en route. Outside, the ambulance's open doors waited under the pulsing lights. They lifted her inside and climbed in with practiced urgency. The doors slammed shut, and the driver accelerated. The interior lights flickered on, bathing her in stark white brightness. Machines beeped sharply as the paramedics attached monitors. Her heart rate flashed erratically on the small screen. Emily's breathing grew more shallow. Her eyelids flickered. A faint tremor moved through her hand. James leaned closer. "Emily, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand." Her fingers twitched again, just barely enough to show she was still fighting. He adjusted the oxygen and glanced at the monitor. "Not good. Stay with me." Her head shifted from the movement of the ambulance. She tried to open her eyes, but the world was only shapes of light and shadow. She could not tell where she was. She could not speak. She could only feel the cold spreading through her limb. Meanwhile, across town at the restaurant, the evening was alive with warm lighting and soft background music. Derek sat comfortably at a corner table with Riley, swirling the wine in his glass while laughing at something she said. The windows beside them reflected the indoor lights like polished dark mirrors. Then the ambulance passed by. Its flashing red lights streaked across the restaurant windows, splashing color over every glass and bottle. The red glow washed across Derek's face, then across the white tablecloth, then across Riley's hair. For a brief moment, the entire dining room flickered with the reflection of emergency lights, vivid enough to draw attention. But Derek did not look up. He kept laughing at Riley's words, completely oblivious to the fact that the vehicle speeding past them was carrying his unconscious wife. Riley leaned in closer, smiling, unaware that the world outside had just brushed against tragedy. Inside the ambulance, the radio crackled again. "Redwood General, this is Unit 7. Patient is critical. Arrival in 4 minutes." The driver made a sharp turn. Emily's head tilted and her breathing caught. She tried again to open her eyes. She managed only a thin slice of vision, seeing the blur of lights overhead. The rushing sound in her ears grew louder. She could not tell if it was the siren or her own heartbeat faltering. "Help my baby." The words formed silently in her mind. Her lips barely moved. James leaned in again. "You are doing great. Just hold on. We are almost there." Her consciousness flickered like a weak flame. She felt herself sinking deeper into darkness. Her muscles slackened. The paramedic noticed the shift and checked her pulse again. It was dangerously faint. "We are losing her. Tell Trauma 2 to be ready." The ambulance finally turned into the hospital entrance. The vehicle jolted to a stop. The driver jumped out and opened the back doors. Bright hospital lights flooded in. A team of nurses stood ready with a gurney. "Let us move. Now." The paramedics unstrapped her and transferred her onto the hospital gurney. Her head rolled slightly, the oxygen mask fogging with each shallow attempt at breath. The nurses took hold of the gurney and rushed her through the automatic doors. The wheels rattled across the tile floor. Overhead lights blurred into long streaks as they pushed her down the hallway. Emily felt herself drifting again, unable to fight the darkness closing around her. Voices rose and fell around her, but she could not understand them. The cold crept deeper into her body. Her vision dimmed completely. As the trauma room doors burst open, the medical team surrounded her. The last thing she sensed was the rush of movement before everything dissolved into silence. The emergency room lights were unforgiving, bright enough to make every corner of the trauma bay feel exposed. Nurses moved quickly around Emily's stretcher, their voices overlapping in tense fragments. Monitors beeped in uneven patterns. The numbers were not stable. The air felt charged, heavy with the urgency that comes when a patient is slipping faster than anyone can predict. Emily's breathing remained shallow. Her chest rose only slightly under the oxygen mask. Her eyelids fluttered without fully opening. She drifted in and out of awareness, her mind stuck between darkness and brief flashes of sound. She could not form full thoughts, only sensations. Cold hands on her skin, sharp pain in her abdomen, distant voices. A doctor pressed a stethoscope against her chest and listened with tight concentration. Her blood pressure is crashing again. She is losing more blood. "We need her husband's consent, and we need it now. Call him again." A nurse lifted the hospital phone and dialed Derek's number for the third time. She waited, tapping her fingers nervously against the counter. The call rang twice before Derek answered. His tone was bored and slightly irritated, as though he had been inconvenienced by something trivial rather than contacted by a hospital in the middle of an emergency. "Yes. What is it now?" The nurse kept her voice steady. "Mr. Ward, your wife is in critical condition. She is suffering from severe bleeding and symptoms of preeclampsia. We need you to come to the hospital immediately to sign surgical consent forms. This is urgent." There was a pause on the line. Not a concerned one, but the kind that comes when someone weighs whether they feel like cooperating. Derek sighed loudly. She always exaggerates. She has been anxious this whole pregnancy. She will be fine. "I am in the middle of something important." The nurse tried again, firmer this time. "Sir, your wife may not survive without an emergency procedure. We need your consent right away." Derek's voice dropped to a colder register. "I said I am busy. Do what you have to do. I will come later." Then he hung up. The nurse stared at the phone for a moment, stunned by the sharp click that ended the call. She turned to the doctor, disbelief still on her face. He refused. Again. The doctor exhaled sharply, his frustration barely contained. "Then we activate emergency authorization. She cannot wait any longer." On the stretcher, Emily stirred weakly. Her lips parted beneath the oxygen mask, releasing a soft whimper. She tried to say something. The syllables were broken, barely shaped. "Derek." Her voice was almost inaudible. The sound cracked with fear more than strength. A nurse leaned closer. "Emily, it is okay. You are at the hospital. We are taking care of you. Stay with us." But Emily heard only fragments. The words reached her as echoes swallowed by pain. She tried to lift a hand, but her arm twitched and fell back against the bed. She felt weightless, as if sinking into water. Her thoughts blurred into each other. Her mind repeated the same plea. "Derek, please." Across town, Derek sat comfortably at the restaurant table. Riley rested her hand on his arm, her posture relaxed and confident. The glow of candlelight danced across their glasses of wine. Riley watched him with a smug smile as he checked his phone screen. "Was that the hospital again?" she asked, her voice dripping with amusement. "Yeah, they keep calling," Derek replied. "Emily is being dramatic, as usual." Riley lifted her glass and took a slow sip. "She just wants attention. You know how she is. She will survive. She always does." Derek smirked as if her words validated everything he wanted to believe. He slid his phone face down on the table. "Good. I am not letting her ruin tonight." They leaned closer together, unaware or unconcerned that Emily's life was slipping through the hands of the medical team desperately trying to save her. Back at the hospital, a nurse examined the fetal monitor again. The baby's heart rate had begun to dip, the screen flashing numbers that sent a ripple of dread through the room. The doctor looked at the monitor, then at Emily, then at the door where no husband had walked in to help them make a decision. "Her vitals are unstable. Get the surgical team ready. Tell them we are moving now." Another nurse hesitated. "But the husband has not signed. We still need approval." The doctor shook his head, his voice lower but urgent. "If he refuses to answer responsibly, we activate an emergency clause. This is a matter of saving 2 lives. There is no time." A nurse hurried out of the trauma bay to alert the operating room. The doctor adjusted the mask on Emily's face, trying to stabilize her oxygen levels, but the monitors continued to show alarming fluctuations. "She is slipping again. Someone get the crash cart ready." Emily's hand twitched once more. She tried to open her eyes but could not. All she could see was light, smeared, and distant, as though someone were shining a flashlight through fog. She sensed movement around her. She sensed fear in the voices. She sensed urgency, but she could not respond. The pain in her abdomen grew sharper. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears like a slow drum. In her fading consciousness, she whispered Derek again, even though no one could hear it clearly. The doctor leaned closer, pressing gently against her stomach to assess the amount of internal pressure. Emily gasped softly, her body arching with an instinctive attempt to pull away. She was too weak. The room filled with movement as nurses prepared IV bags, surgical tools, and emergency medications. The overhead lights seemed to grow brighter. The walls felt closer. Everything felt tighter, as if the world had narrowed to only this room and this moment. One nurse leaned closer to another, speaking quietly but with growing fear. "If we wait any longer for him, she could go into cardiac arrest. We cannot delay." The doctor made the final call. "We do not have much time. Take her to the operating room now." The nurses released the brakes on the hospital bed. The wheels clicked into motion. The stretcher began moving toward the hallway. The bright lights above passed rapidly over Emily's face. Her fingers curled slightly at the sudden motion, but she did not wake. Her breathing grew even more shallow. The ER doors opened. The gurney pushed out into the corridor. A nurse ran ahead to clear the path to the operating room. The medical team gathered around the moving bed with practiced coordination. Emily's world dimmed further. She could no longer hear the shouts around her. She could not tell where she was being taken. Her body felt weightless, drifting. The operating room doors swung open, revealing the bright white light inside. The team rushed her in. The last thing she sensed was the shift of air as she crossed the threshold. Henry Ward had just fallen asleep when the phone rang. The sound cut sharply through the quiet of his small home, forcing him upright in bed before he could fully understand what was happening. He blinked at the clock on his nightstand. It was nearly 2 in the morning. No one called at that hour, unless it was something unimaginable. His heart tightened even before he lifted the phone to his ear. "This is Redwood General Hospital. Are you the father of Emily Ward?" The voice was calm, but Henry heard the tension underneath it. He felt his breath hitch. "Yes, this is her father. What happened? Is she hurt?" "Sir, your daughter has been brought in with severe complications. She is in critical condition. We need you to come to the hospital immediately." Henry was already pulling on his boots before the call ended. He grabbed his old fire department jacket from the hook near the door, the one he had kept even after retirement. His hands trembled as he fumbled with the zipper. For a brief moment, he had to steady himself against the wall. He whispered a small prayer under his breath, the kind he had not spoken in years. The drive to the hospital felt endless. The headlights carved a narrow path through the darkness. As Henry gripped the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. He kept replaying the words in his mind. Critical condition. Severe complications. Emily, his little girl. The baby he once carried on his shoulders, who now carried a child of her own. He parked crookedly in the emergency lot and ran toward the entrance. The cold night air bit at his face, but he barely felt it. As he stepped through the doors, the sterile brightness of the hospital swallowed him immediately. A nurse behind the desk looked up, startled by the abruptness of his arrival. "My name is Henry Ward. My daughter is here, Emily Ward. Please tell me where she is." The nurse's expression softened with sympathy. Her voice remained careful, steady. "Mr. Ward, follow me. I will take you to her." Henry followed, his steps uneven, the floor passing under him in a blur of polished tile and fluorescent light. They turned a corner into a trauma bay where a cluster of medical staff moved around a stretcher. Henry's breath caught. Emily lay motionless beneath the lights. Her skin was pale, almost gray. An oxygen mask covered the lower half of her face. Electrodes dotted her chest. Her hair was damp against her temples. Her belly rose under the thin hospital sheet, but the movements were irregular, strained. A monitor beside her emitted an unstable rhythm that made Henry's chest tighten painfully. He approached slowly, as if fearing the space around her might shatter. When he reached her side, he touched her hand gently. It was cold and limp. His voice cracked the instant he tried to speak. "Emily, sweetheart, Dad is here." Her eyelids fluttered faintly but did not open. Henry leaned closer, squeezing her hand carefully, afraid that too much pressure would hurt her. He saw the faint tremor in her fingers when she tried to respond. It was barely there, yet it struck him harder than any fire he had ever faced in his years on the force. It told him she was fighting. It told him she needed him. A nurse stepped beside him. "Sir, she is very unstable. Her blood pressure is dangerously low. We are preparing for an emergency C-section." Henry swallowed hard. His jaw clenched. "Where is her husband?" The nurse hesitated. She lowered her eyes before answering. "He has not arrived. We have tried multiple times. He did not come." Henry's breath shook with anger he tried to contain. He looked down at Emily, then back at the nurse. His voice deepened. "Then he will not interfere. Do you understand? My daughter is not alone. You do whatever needs to be done to save her and that baby." The nurse nodded quickly. "We need someone to sign the emergency authorization forms. We cannot wait any longer." Henry straightened. His hands were steady now, fueled by a resolve as strong as steel. "Show me the papers." She offered him a clipboard. He read nothing. He trusted the team because he had to. Every second mattered. He signed his name with firm, unwavering strokes, then handed the clipboard back. A doctor rushed toward him, speaking rapidly. "Mr. Ward, we are taking her into surgery now. Her vitals are deteriorating. We have to move immediately." Henry nodded, though his throat felt tight. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to Emily's forehead. His voice broke into a whisper only she could hear. "I am here, Emily. You hold on. Do you hear me? You hold on." The medical team unlocked the bed and began wheeling her toward the hallway. Henry stepped back, watching helplessly as they guided her away. Her oxygen mask fogged slightly with each inconsistent breath. Her hand lay still beside her. The bed rolled through the trauma bay doors and disappeared around the corner. Henry followed until he reached the restricted surgical wing. A nurse raised a hand. "Sir, you cannot go past this point. You can wait here." He stopped, but remained close enough to see the lights above the operating room flicker from white to red. The sign marked "Surgery in Progress," illuminated with a soft glow that filled the entire hallway with an unnatural quiet. The doors sealed shut with a firm click. Henry felt the weight of everything crash down on him all at once. He placed one hand on the wall, steadying himself. His breaths came slowly as he tried to keep calm. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic, sharp and cold. The sound of distant footsteps echoed like whispers. He clasped his hands together, the way he used to before entering burning buildings, grounding himself in the promise that he would not lose control. His mind replayed Emily's small movements, her faint attempts to respond to his voice, the unbearable pale shade of her face. Minutes felt like hours. Henry stood completely still, the glow of the red surgical light reflecting in his eyes. He looked up at the ceiling, then back toward the doors, as if his presence alone could keep her alive. Then he spoke softly, barely above a breath. It was not a plea, it was a vow. "If she survives, I will never let anyone hurt her again." The surgical wing was quiet, except for the muffled sounds behind the operating room doors. Henry stood in the hallway with his hands clasped tightly in front of him. His heart thudded painfully with each passing second. He tried to focus on breathing, but every inhale felt heavy. The red light above the operating room continued to glow as a constant reminder that Emily's life was hanging by a thread. A doctor stepped out briefly and approached Henry with a careful expression. "Mr. Ward, while we operate, there are some things you need to know." Henry braced himself. The doctor continued, her voice soft but firm. "We reviewed the records. Emily placed multiple calls to her husband before she lost consciousness. She begged for help. She was alone for a long time." Henry closed his eyes. The words struck him like a blow to the chest. He took a slow breath through his nose. How long? How long was she on the floor by herself? The doctor hesitated. Far too long. She tried to reach him again and again. Her voice was in extreme distress. She was pleading. Henry's jaw tightened. He tried to keep his voice steady, but anger trembled beneath every word. And he did not come. "No, sir." He never responded in time. Henry looked down at the floor. His boots felt too heavy. He imagined Emily on the cold wood, reaching for the phone, terrified and in pain. He pushed his hand against his mouth for a moment, trying to keep himself from breaking apart. Another voice interrupted the silence. It was an officer, standing near the doorway. "Sir, I am Officer Ramirez. I am here regarding the 911 call. We listened to the final recording." Emily's voice weakened quickly. She stopped responding completely. "We believe she passed out alone without support." Henry nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." Ramirez continued. "We also gathered camera footage from the street. The ambulance passed a restaurant nearby. The driver noted that the lights flashed across the windows as they went by." Henry felt something inside him shift. Something dark. Wait, a restaurant. Which one? Ramirez named it. It was the restaurant Derek often visited. Henry looked away, gripping the back of a chair to steady himself. He forced himself to ask, was he there? The officer's pause was answer enough, but he added the confirmation anyway. Yes, he was seen on camera, laughing, eating, sitting with another woman. He did not look outside. He did not notice the ambulance at all. Henry inhaled slowly. His hands tightened around the chair until his knuckles turned white. He kept his voice low to avoid letting rage overpower him. She could have died on that floor. And he sat there. The doctor nodded somberly. "I am afraid the delay made her condition worse. The blood loss and the preeclampsia both accelerated. If she had received help sooner, the risk would have been significantly lower." Henry pressed a hand over his chest. He felt a burning pressure beneath his ribs. It was not physical pain. It was something deeper. Something that came from the memory of every moment he tried to protect Emily growing up. Every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every time she had run into his arms crying. And now she had cried for help when it mattered the most. And the one person who should have run to her chose not to. He lifted his head and straightened. Keep all of this. Every file, every timestamp, every phone call attempt she made. I want nothing erased. Do you understand? The nurse beside the doctor nodded quickly. Of course, everything is being documented. Henry turned to Officer Ramirez. Can you file an official statement? I want record of him refusing to come even after being told she was in danger. The officer pulled out a small notepad. Absolutely. We will include every detail in the report. The 911 operator has already shared her account. She confirmed Emily's last words before losing consciousness were pleas for help. Henry closed his eyes again for a moment. His voice dropped to a heavy whisper. She deserved better than that. She deserved someone who cared. Across town, at the same restaurant captured in the footage, Riley sat with a tense expression. She scrolled through her phone while Derek poured himself more wine. She looked up suddenly, her face pale. Derek. It says Emily is in surgery. They say she might not make it. Derek rolled his eyes as if the situation annoyed him more than frightened him. She is exaggerating. She always does this. Riley swallowed, worry creeping into her voice. The cameras saw us. People saw us laughing while the ambulance went by. They will think we ignored her. Derek leaned back in his chair. Let them think whatever they want. She probably caused this herself. She knows how to get attention. Riley looked down nervously. For the first time, doubt appeared in her expression. She did not respond. Back at the hospital, Henry continued speaking with the officer. I want to file a complaint. I want every part of this documented as neglect. He was told she was in danger. He chose to ignore her. He left her to die. Ramirez nodded. We can proceed with that. The circumstances meet the criteria for an investigation. Henry's face was set in stone. His voice no longer shook. Every trace of uncertainty had burned away, replaced by a cold determination. Good. I will not let what he did disappear into nothing. She deserves justice, and that baby deserves a chance. The doctor stepped closer. Mr. Ward, we are doing everything we can. The delay made it harder, but we are fighting for her. Henry met her eyes, steady and certain. Thank you, but I want you to know, when she wakes up, I will not let her go back to that man. They all nodded. No one argued. No one had to. The hallway fell quiet again as the medical staff returned to their duties. Henry remained where he was, staring at the red glow above the operating room door. It was the color of urgency, the color of danger, the color of every second Emily had suffered while Derek sat with another woman. Henry placed a hand flat against the wall beside him. His voice dropped to a low, unwavering promise. I am filing the charges tonight. He will answer for what he did. The words hung in the air like a vow carved into stone, marking the beginning of the storm that awaited Derek next. Derek arrived at the hospital long after the chaos had unfolded, pushing through the automatic doors with an irritated expression, not a concerned one. The fluorescent lights washed over him as he paused in the lobby, adjusting the collar of his jacket like a man preparing to face an inconvenience rather than a crisis. He had not come because he feared for Emily. He had come because he noticed whispers spreading online, posts about a pregnant woman nearly dying alone, comments wondering where her husband was. A few tagged his name. His heart had jumped, not from guilt but from panic. He approached the front desk with a forced sigh, trying to sound exhausted rather than annoyed. I am here to check on my wife, Emily Ward. She is overreacting again. He added the last sentence with a tone meant to convince the nurse that he was the calm one in the situation. The nurse did not even blink. She simply pointed him toward the hallway where Henry waited. Henry stood with his arms folded, his posture still as stone. When he saw Derek walking toward him, his jaw tightened. He stepped forward before Derek could speak. His voice was low but sharp enough to cut through the hallway. How many times did my daughter call you while she was dying on that floor? Derek's confidence faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly, lifting his chin slightly. I did not get any calls. Emily tends to exaggerate. She gets emotional. She always has. Henry did not react. He simply pulled a folder from under his arm and opened it. Inside were printed timestamps, screenshots, and still images. He held them out one by one like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "These are the call logs. She called you 5 times. These are the 911 transcripts. She begged for help. And these are the camera recordings from the restaurant. They show you laughing while the ambulance lights passed across your table." Derek's face tightened. He looked around and saw nurses and officers watching. For the first time that evening, his composure cracked. He swallowed hard and tried to regain his tone. "This is all taken out of context. You do not understand our marriage. Emily has mood swings. She has caused scenes before. She does this to herself." Henry stepped closer until he was only inches away. "My daughter was bleeding out. She was unconscious on the floor. And you sat there with another woman." Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Before he could stammer a reply, Riley appeared at the end of the hallway. She hurried toward them, but a security guard blocked her path. "Only immediate family, ma'am. She cannot go in," the guard said. Riley protested, her voice rising in panic, which only drew more attention. Derek's face flushed with humiliation. Desperate to regain control, Derek pulled out his phone and stepped aside. He called his attorney. The moment the lawyer answered, Derek's voice turned harsh. "They are trying to portray me as a monster. You fix this. I will not lose, because she wants to play the victim." Riley moved closer, whispering urgently, "We can fight this. We can release statements. We can show people she has always had issues. We just need proof." Together, with the lawyer feeding ideas through the phone, they began crafting a strategy. They would claim Emily suffered from emotional instability. They would imply she had past episodes of dramatic behavior. Riley offered to create text messages that made Emily appear irrational. She typed quickly, forging conversations that never happened. Derek approved them without hesitation. His voice grew louder as he spoke with the lawyer again. "She is trying to ruin me. I will not let this happen." Meanwhile, the first wave of reporters gathered outside the hospital. Headlines began to circulate online. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some posts defended Emily, but many carried Derek's planted narratives. Henry saw a nurse whispering to another, showing her a news alert on her phone. The headline made Henry feel sick. "A pregnant woman collapses at home. Husband says she has a history of exaggeration." Inside the recovery area, Emily lay unconscious, her breath assisted by a mask. Machines beeped steadily around her. She was unaware of the war unfolding outside her room, but faint sounds slipped in through the cracked door. She heard pieces of conversations, words like unstable and dramatic. Her brow twitched. Even in her weakened state, her body reacted to the cruelty being spread about her. Henry stood at the door, hands in his pockets, watching his daughter fight for her life. He heard Derek raising his voice again, shouting into the phone near the nurse's station. "I am not going down for this. She did this to herself. She always does." Henry turned slowly and walked toward him. His steps were controlled, each one echoing with the weight of a father who had reached his limit. When he reached Derek, he spoke softly, which somehow made the words more terrifying. "You will stop lying. You will stop spreading stories about her. You will stop pretending she caused her own suffering. Or so help me, I will make sure every word you say becomes evidence against you." Derek scoffed, but his eyes flickered with fear. "You cannot control me." A police officer stepped forward at that moment, holding a clipboard. "Mr. Ward, we need you to sign the confrontation report. Your presence here is required." Derek froze. The officer repeated, "You ignored emergency calls. You refused hospital contact. This report will be part of the investigation." Riley watched from a distance with growing panic. Derek swallowed hard, his bravado collapsing inch by inch. The hallway had grown quiet. Everyone seemed to be watching. Henry leaned in one last time, his voice steady and cold. "You will not come near my daughter again, unless the police allow it." Derek did not answer. He took the pen from the officer with trembling fingers. Emily, unconscious inside her room, breathed softly behind the door. Henry positioned himself outside like a guardian, standing firm as Derek signed the report, his empire beginning to crack. That moment marked the true beginning of Derek's unraveling. The recovery room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and the soft hum of the oxygen machine. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting thin lines of pale gold across Emily's bed. She lay still, wrapped in a white blanket, her breathing slow and controlled. Her face looked fragile in the soft light. Her skin was pale from blood loss, and faint tear marks rested along her cheeks. Yet her chest rose with steady, deliberate breaths. She was alive. After hours of surgery and hours more of uncertainty, her eyelids finally fluttered. At first, the world came back to her in fragments, a faint glow behind her eyelids, the cold scent of antiseptic, the dull ache spreading across her abdomen, voices that faded in and out like distant waves. She blinked again, forcing her eyes open. The ceiling came into focus slowly, then the room around her. The first face she recognized was Henry's. He had fallen asleep with his elbows resting on the edge of her bed, his hand still wrapped around hers. His usually strong posture was slouched from exhaustion. His hair, normally combed neatly back, had fallen forward over his forehead. When Emily's fingers twitched in his palm, Henry lifted his head with a start. His eyes widened with relief. "Emily, sweetheart, you are awake." His voice cracked, but there was strength in it. Emily parted her lips, but no sound came out at first. Her throat was dry. She tried again, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad." Henry leaned closer. "I am right here, sweetheart. You are safe now." Emily tried to process her surroundings, but confusion clouded her expression. Pain tightened her brow. She looked down toward her abdomen. A gentle pressure wrapped around her midsection, holding the surgical bandages in place. She struggled to speak. "What happened?" Henry hesitated. He knew she deserved the truth. He also knew the truth would hurt more than the surgery did. He took a slow breath and squeezed her hand gently. "Emily, you went into emergency surgery. You lost a lot of blood. The doctors had to act fast to save you and the baby." Emily's lips trembled. She felt tears building, but she kept her gaze steady. She waited for the second blow. The part of the story she somehow already sensed was coming. Henry tightened his grip. "When you called for help, Derek did not come. He was at a restaurant with that woman. He ignored the calls. He hung up on the hospital. He tried to claim you were overreacting. And now he is spreading lies about you." Emily's eyes filled. For a moment, her chest felt too tight to breathe. The betrayal, the abandonment, the cruelty of being left alone on that floor rushed through her. A sob formed in her throat, but she fought it back. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. Henry touched her forehead gently. "I am so sorry, sweetheart. You deserved better." Emily closed her eyes again, letting the tears fall. But instead of collapsing into despair, something shifted inside her. The pain was real, but beneath it was a quiet resolve, like a flame slowly pushing back against the darkness. When she opened her eyes again, there was a new steadiness in them. "I will not let him hurt me again." Her voice shook, but the conviction was unmistakable. "I will not let him hurt my baby, not ever again." Henry nodded, relief crossing his features. "That is why I called someone who can help us fight back. Someone who will make sure Derek does not get away with this." A soft knock sounded at the door. A woman stepped inside. She wore a dark blazer and carried a folder in her hand. Her posture was firm, confident, and composed. "Emily, my name is Claire Hartman. I am a civil rights attorney. Your father reached out to me." Emily looked at her through tear-filled eyes. Claire walked closer, pulling a chair to the bedside. She spoke gently but with authority. "I am here because what happened to you is not only immoral, it is illegal. Leaving a pregnant woman in a medical emergency is neglect. Spreading false statements about her mental health is defamation. You do not have to face this alone. If you choose to stand up, I will stand with you." Henry watched his daughter carefully. He could see the fear in her eyes, but also the strength building beneath it. Emily took a slow breath and nodded. "Tell me what I have to do." Claire opened the folder. Inside were documents titled Legal Authorization and Temporary Protective Measures. She explained each one clearly. "This gives me permission to act on your behalf. It protects you from Derek contacting you. It gives us the right to pursue a case for medical neglect, reckless endangerment, and defamation." Emily listened, her breathing unsteady, but there was no hesitation in her gaze. Her hand trembled as she reached for the pen Henry handed her. Claire watched her with quiet respect. Henry placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. Emily steadied her grip. She looked at the papers, then she looked at her father, then she signed. With one stroke of ink, she transformed from a victim fighting for survival to a woman taking back her life. Claire closed the folder gently. "I will file everything within the hour. We begin today." Emily exhaled shakily. She leaned back against the pillow, exhausted but lighter somehow. A nurse entered the room and whispered to Henry that news of Emily's survival was spreading. Reporters outside were beginning to shift the narrative. The story was no longer about a dramatic wife. It was about a mother who nearly died alone. Emily heard this and let her eyes close, not from weakness, but from relief. Henry sat beside her, pride softening his features. He squeezed her hand again. "You are not alone anymore, sweetheart. From here on, we stand together." The room settled into a calm stillness, but the shift had already begun. Emily had taken her first stand, and the world outside the hospital would soon feel the impact. The morning air outside the FBI field office in Northern California was tense and unusually still. Inside, however, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Agents hurried through the hallways with folders tucked under their arms, and the conference room lights glowed with a sterile brightness that made every shadow look sharper than usual. Claire stood at the center of the room, her hands resting on a stack of evidence files. Henry stood beside her, his arms crossed, his expression made of stone. A senior FBI agent entered the room and gestured for everyone to sit. "We have reviewed the information provided by the hospital and the attorney. Based on what we received, this case now qualifies as potential criminal neglect and obstruction. Given the severity of her condition, we are elevating this investigation." Claire nodded, her face steady. Henry remained silent, but his eyes were fixed on the folders, as if the weight of every page rested on his shoulders. The agent opened the first file and displayed the audio transcript from the 911 call. Emily's trembling voice filled the room through the speakers. She pleaded for help, her breath short, her tone frantic. The audio captured every second of fear, every gasp, every fading word. As the sound weakened, the room grew unbearably quiet. When the recording went silent, Henry shut his eyes, fighting the urge to break down. Next, the agent projected footage from the restaurant camera. Derek and Riley appeared on screen, laughing and sipping wine. A moment later, the ambulance lights flashed across the windows, bathing their faces in red. Neither of them looked up. They continued laughing, completely unaware that Emily was lying alone on the floor of their home. Several agents exchanged glances. One shook his head in disbelief. "We also have the call logs," the agent continued, placing the printed sheets on the table. 5 missed calls from Emily. A call from the hospital, which Derek disconnected. Statements from paramedics confirmed she was found unresponsive. A nurse also confirmed Derek was notified of the emergency. Claire added, "This was not a misunderstanding. This was a choice, a deliberate refusal to act." The agent nodded once, then spoke into a radio. "Bring them in, both of them." 15 minutes later, Derek arrived at the FBI office, escorted by 2 agents. His eyes darted around the hallway, searching for someone to blame, someone to challenge, someone to fool. Riley followed behind him, visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. They were separated immediately and led into different interrogation rooms. Inside the interrogation room, Derek sat at the metal table, tapping his foot impatiently. He attempted to project confidence, but the mask slipped the moment the agents placed the stack of evidence in front of him. The lead agent spoke calmly. "We are giving you an opportunity to tell the truth. We already have enough to move forward." Derek swallowed, sweat forming at the back of his neck. "I did not do anything wrong. She is dramatic. She has always made things look worse than they are." The agent pressed play on the 911 recording. Emily's voice filled the small room. Derek's face lost a shade of color. When the footage from the restaurant began to play, he stared at the screen in silent horror. His voice cracked. "That does not prove anything. I did not know she needed help. You ignored 5 calls and hung up on the hospital." The agent leaned forward. "We have every timestamp, every piece of evidence, every witness." Derek looked down at his hands, trying to find any excuse. His voice shrank. "I was busy." In the adjacent room, Riley sat trembling. She tried to hold her composure, but when the agent placed a photo of Emily in the trauma bay in front of her, she broke. Tears spilled over. She confessed everything. She admitted Derek dismissed Emily's calls. She admitted he laughed when he saw the hospital number appear. She admitted she helped him create false messages to discredit Emily. When the agents asked if Derek intentionally ignored Emily's pleas, Riley whispered, "Yes. he chose not to help her. The decision was immediate. The lead agent returned to Henry and Claire. "We have enough. Derek Ward is being taken into custody for criminal neglect, reckless endangerment, and obstruction. Riley Moore is being released, but will be summoned for court testimony." Henry nodded, though pain flickered behind his eyes. Justice was beginning, but it came with its own weight. In the holding area, Derek's arrogance collapsed the moment agents handcuffed him. His wrists trembled as he was led to the transport van. Reporters waiting outside captured the moment. Cameras flashed. Questions flew through the air. Derek tried to hide his face, but there was nowhere left to run. By the time he arrived at the county jail, the news had already erupted online. Social media was filled with anger, disgust, and support for Emily. Inside the jail, Derek quickly learned that inmates did not look kindly on men who abandoned pregnant wives in medical emergencies. Rumors spread through the cell block long before he arrived. When he was placed in a temporary holding cell, several inmates glared at him with open hostility. One muttered, "So you are the guy who left your pregnant wife to die." The tension grew fast. Derek pressed himself back against the wall, his breath shaking. The guards intervened before the situation escalated too far, but not before Derek felt the sting of a fist against his ribs and the burning humiliation that followed. For the first time, fear crawled through him in a way he could not disguise. Hours later, he sat alone in the corner of his cell, bruised, exhausted, his confidence shattered. The cold concrete floor beneath him seemed to echo the collapse of everything he once believed he controlled. Above him, a small light flickered, casting a pale glow over his face. His eyes, once filled with arrogance, now held only dread. And for the first time, Derek understood that his downfall had only just begun. The courthouse was crowded long before the hearing began. Reporters gathered in clusters on the steps, their cameras poised and ready. The whispers about the case had already spread across the state. A husband who ignored the cries of his pregnant wife, a mistress who helped him cover it up, an FBI investigation that left no room for doubt. The story had all the elements of a tragedy, and now it was arriving at its reckoning. Inside the courtroom, the air felt heavy with anticipation. Every seat was filled. Emily sat in the front row in a wheelchair, her body still weak from surgery. Henry stood behind her, one hand resting on her shoulder to steady her. Claire sat at their side with her files stacked neatly in front of her. Emily's breaths were slow and measured, but there was a quiet determination in her posture. She had come to witness the fall of the man who nearly ended her life. The courtroom doors opened. Derek entered, flanked by officers. His appearance shocked the room. His face was bruised, his jaw slightly swollen, his eyes hollow from nights in the county jail. His once confident stride had been replaced by a stumbling, uncertain walk. He looked smaller now, not physically, but in presence, as if the arrogance he carried had been stripped from him layer by layer. Riley entered a moment later with 2 deputies beside her. She was not handcuffed, but looked equally shaken. Her makeup barely concealed her red and swollen eyes. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, unable to face the crowd. When the judge entered and the room rose, a hush fell over everyone. The proceedings began. A clerk announced the case, and then the prosecutor stepped forward. "Your Honor, today we present clear evidence of reckless endangerment, criminal neglect, obstruction, and defamation." The prosecutor moved methodically, starting with the audio recording of the 911 call. Emily's frail voice echoed across the courtroom. There was a collective intake of breath as her cries filled the room. Emily closed her eyes, her hand trembling slightly. Henry rested his hand on top of hers, steadying her. Next came the footage from the restaurant camera. The large screen showed Derek and Riley laughing under warm lights. Then came the bright flash of the ambulance passing by. The contrast was devastating. Derek shifted in his seat, unable to look at the screen. Riley covered her mouth, tears welling again. The prosecutor continued. "We also have the call logs from Emily's phone, 5 unanswered calls. We have the hospital records showing Derek disconnected the call from medical staff. We have sworn statements from nurses, paramedics, doctors, and investigators." The room listened in stunned silence. Riley was called to the stand first. She walked slowly to her seat, her hands shaking as she raised her right hand to take the oath. When asked to describe the events of that night, her voice broke almost immediately. She confessed everything. She admitted Derek saw the hospital's number and ignored it. She admitted Derek mocked Emily for being dramatic. She admitted she helped fabricate messages to paint Emily as unstable. She added that Derek said Emily needed to learn a lesson. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Even the judge's expression hardened. When Derek was called to speak, he rose from his chair with difficulty. The judge warned him to answer the questions directly. Derek attempted to regain control, but each question chipped away at him. He tried to blame Emily. He tried to blame stress. He tried to blame misunderstandings, but the evidence left him nowhere to run. When confronted with Riley's testimony, Derek snapped. He slammed his hands on the table and shouted, "She is lying. She wants to save herself. She is the one who told me to ignore the calls. None of this is my fault." The courtroom gasped. The judge immediately reprimanded him for the outburst. His explosion only made things worse. It revealed the very nature he had tried to hide. The prosecutor then presented the final charges. Derek Ward is guilty of criminal neglect, guilty of reckless endangerment, guilty of obstruction of justice, guilty of defamation. Riley Moore is guilty of aiding in fabrication of false evidence and intentional misrepresentation. The judge called the courtroom to order. Silence fell as he delivered the ruling. For Derek Ward, you have demonstrated a blatant disregard for the safety of your wife and unborn child. You actively ignored calls for help. You attempted to manipulate the narrative to protect your reputation. Your actions nearly cost 2 lives. You are hereby sentenced to 2 years in state custody. A cry of relief escaped from someone in the gallery. Derek swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. The judge continued, "In addition, you are stripped of all legal parental rights. This court orders the forfeiture of significant assets to compensate for emotional and physical damages inflicted upon your wife. The remainder of your estate will be held in trust for the child." Derek's mouth fell open in shock. His hands trembled. He turned toward Emily, but she did not meet his gaze. For Riley Moore, "The court acknowledges your cooperation. However, your participation in fabricating evidence and assisting in defamation is a serious offense. You are sentenced to 1 year of supervised probation. You will remain within your registered residence and comply with regular monitoring." Riley nodded through tears, whispering thank you in a shaking voice, grateful not to follow Derek into custody. When the gavel struck, the courtroom erupted into a mix of tears and applause. Emily held her breath, letting the weight of the moment settle. She felt Henry kneel beside her, wrapping his arms around her gently. "It is over, sweetheart. You are safe now." Emily closed her eyes as the tension finally released from her chest. For the first time since that terrible night, she felt the faint, fragile glow of peace. The days following the verdict felt different from anything Emily had experienced in a long time. The weight that had pressed on her chest for months finally began to lift, replaced by a soft sense of quiet she had almost forgotten existed. When Henry brought her home from the hospital, the late afternoon sun cast warm light across the front porch, illuminating the wooden steps and the old welcome mat that had faded from years of use. Emily paused before entering, breathing in the familiar scent of pine and warm air. It felt like returning to a life she once lost, except now it was hers to rebuild. Inside, the house was calm. The curtains swayed gently with the breeze. A vase of fresh flowers sat on the table, left by neighbors who had delivered meals, cards, and comforting notes. Emily held her newborn close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest. The room felt safer than it had in years. Henry set down her bags and helped her settle onto the couch before sitting beside her, watching her quietly, as if afraid she might break if the world moved too suddenly. "You look stronger already," he said softly. Emily smiled faintly. "I feel different, lighter, like I can breathe again." The doctors had told her earlier that morning that her recovery was progressing better than expected. The surgical wound was healing cleanly, her blood pressure had stabilized. The exhaustion in her eyes was still present, but her spirit seemed to be finding its footing again. For the first time, she felt like she could truly rest without fear creeping in at the edges of her mind. Henry walked into the hallway and returned holding a stack of envelopes. "These came for you. Cards, letters, a few gifts too. People wanted you to know they are thinking of you." Emily ran her fingers across the envelopes. She recognized the handwriting of her elderly neighbor, the teenage girl who lived 3 houses away, and the family who often waved when she pushed her stroller along the sidewalk. Each gesture reminded her that she was part of a community that cared for her even when the person who should have protected her did not. Claire visited later that afternoon, her steps soft against the hardwood floor. She placed a folder on the coffee table. "Emily, I wanted to update you. The settlement is complete. A portion of Derek's remaining assets has been legally transferred to a trust for your child's future care and education. It is secure. It cannot be touched by him or anyone else." Emily looked up with gratitude. "Thank you for everything." Claire nodded with a gentle smile. "You stood up for yourself. You made this possible." After Claire left, Emily held her baby again, brushing a finger against the child's tiny hand. The room felt like a cocoon, wrapped in the promise of new beginnings. But healing meant more than rest. It meant facing what had happened and allowing the wounds to close in the right way. A week later, she began sessions with a therapist recommended by the hospital. The first time she sat in the office chair, she trembled as she described the night she lay alone on the floor, calling for help. The therapist listened with compassion, guiding her gently through the fear and grief she had buried. Each session helped her reclaim pieces of herself she thought were lost. She learned to separate her worth from Derek's cruelty. She learned to breathe through the memories instead of drowning in them. She learned to forgive herself for not leaving sooner. Healing was slow, sometimes painful, but it was hers to claim. While Emily rebuilt her emotional strength, Henry worked to rebuild her physical environment. He spent days repainting the nursery walls in soft pastel tones. He installed new curtains that let in warm morning light. He built a wooden shelf for baby books and toys. Every nail he hammered into the wall was an act of love, a promise that Emily and her child would never feel unprotected again. One evening, Emily walked into the nursery while Henry was finishing the final touches. He looked up at her, paint on his sleeves and sweat on his brow. "What do you think?" Emily stepped closer. The room was bright and warm, filled with the gentle blue of a clear sky. She touched the crib railing and felt tears push against her eyes, but they were not the heavy kind. They were soft, healing tears. "It is perfect, Dad." Henry rested his hand on her shoulder. "You both deserve a fresh start." That night, Emily settled into the rocking chair with her baby, gently swaying as she hummed a lullaby. She watched the baby's peaceful expression and felt a profound sense of gratitude. This child had survived with her. This child was the reason she fought through the darkness. When she looked out the window, she saw the street lamp glowing softly, casting a golden circle on the sidewalk. Life felt gentler, almost sacred. A few days later, Emily stepped onto the porch with Henry beside her. The morning light spilled over the neighborhood in warm hues. She stood quietly, letting the sunlight wash over her. It felt like being embraced by something she could not see but deeply understood. The world outside did not feel threatening anymore. It felt open, new, possible. Emily turned to Henry, her voice steady and clear. "We survived. But I want more than survival now. I want to live the life I deserve, the life my child deserves." Henry nodded, pride filling his expression. "And you will. We will make sure of it." Emily stepped back inside, her baby in her arms, and opened the front door wide. The light poured into the home, illuminating the hallway and filling the space with warmth. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by fear or betrayal, but by strength, hope, and the promise of healing. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt whole.